Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. Back with more vibes for all you. Yes, and this one right here is called 10 More Fairy Tale Dark Origins. Yeah, this one is kind of a decent length one. It's like, 18 minutes or something like that. But I think this is going to be interesting, especially since I grew up with a lot of fairy tales. I don't know, like I said before, if they still have them fairy tales being told in schools here and thing, you know what I mean? And thing. But you're still going to know about some of them, you know what I mean? So let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer, see what this dark fairy tales origins are about.
Over 2 years ago, I made a top 10 about fairy tale dark origins for fun, because it was something that interested me. After that, it took off, pushing me to create more top 10s that I found interesting, and hopefully others did too. It now sits at over 3.5 million views, and is by far my most viewed video across all my channels. And I'm going back to those roots. Here are 10 more fairy tale dark origins. Aladdin. We all know him as a lovable street rat. However, in the original version of the tale, Aladdin is far from lovable. Rather, he is an impetuous, lazy, and stupid boy who refuses to make anything of himself, to the point that, at the beginning of the story, his father literally dies of disappointment. Then, when Aladdin finds his genies and achieves some measure of success, he believes himself worthy of the Sultan's daughter. Unfortunately, the princess is already betrothed to another. But this is no worry for Aladdin. No, he chooses to kidnap the princess on the night of her wedding, forces her to spend the night with him, and sends her fiancé off to be tortured by Aladdin's jinn, thereby preventing the princess from consummating her marriage. He does this long enough that her fiancé believes the marriage is cursed and abandons her, at which point Aladdin steals her for himself. Aladdin eventually marries the princess and outbuilds the Sultan's palace to prove his right to rule the throne, until the evil sorcerer decides to have his revenge on Aladdin, steals the genie's lamp, and teleports Aladdin's palace, princess and all, into the desert. Aladdin despairs and nearly commits suicide by jumping into a river, before remembering he has a tiny djinn in a ring on his finger. Using the djinn, he finds his palace, reaches the princess, and forces her to first seduce the sorcerer, and then to murder him. Our hero, everybody.
Wow! I got this flowery story of Aladdin.
In some versions of The Frog Prince, the prince doesn't return to form after the princess kisses him, or he spends a few nights on a pillow. No, instead the princess has to cause him physical harm. In one, she throws him as hard as she possibly can against the wall. In another, she burns him to a crisp. And in another, she literally chops his head off. And that's what breaks the spell. Nothing like being decapitated by your future wife.
Sounds familiar.
The story of Rumpelstiltskin is fairly well known. A man brags about his daughter's ability to weave, claiming she's so good that she can turn straw to gold. The king hears about this and forces her to prove her abilities under penalty of death, and an imp comes to save her. On the third night, he asks her something in return, and she has nothing to offer him. "Worry not, my dear," he says, "just give me your firstborn child." The girl agrees, the room is turned to gold, and the king marries her. Of course, not long after getting married, she has a son, and the imp comes to take the child. She begs for a second chance and tells her that he will only give the child back if she discovers his name. Lo and behold, the girl does discover his name, and when he comes back to collect the child, she tells him that it's Rumpelstiltskin. Infuriated, the little imp stamps his foot so hard he lodges it into the ground, and in his fury, commits suicide by grabbing his left leg and ripping himself in half. Yeah.
Whoa! Man, that's some vicious stuff. Woo.
Undine is a story about a beautiful maiden who lives by the seaside and the knight who falls in love with her. Sounds like your standard fairy tale, right?
Yeah.
There's just one problem. The maiden doesn't have a soul. People today might know Undine as a character from the popular video game Undertale, but back in the early 1800s, Undine was one of the creepiest German fairy tales around. The story of Undine starts off with a fisherman, his wife, and their young daughter. One day, the daughter slips from the mother's grasp and drowns in the lake. The fisherman and his wife mourn until later that day, when Undine arrives at their cottage, blonde hair dripping with water. The fisherman decides to raise her as his own and takes the silent, well-behaved child to be baptized, only for her to start screaming as soon as the ceremony is over. The ceremony causes Undine to grow willful and wild, but despite this, the family grows together happily. One day, a knight comes to the little cottage in the forest and falls in love with Undine, despite the fact that her lack of soul renders her terribly selfish and incapable of empathy. Upon a priest's visit to the cottage, Undine marries the knight. He promises to love her forever, and on her wedding day, Undine is granted a soul by God. Undine and her knight return to the city, only to discover there was another lady close to her knight before this journey, a woman named Bertalda. Despite Bertalda's love for the knight, she and Undine become good friends, at first. But soon Bertalda learns the truth about Undine, that she is a water spirit, given a soul by love, and grows cold to her. And as Bertalda grows cold to her, she convinces the knight to grow suspicious of his wife as well. Undine despairs as over time she watches the love leave her knight's eyes and her knight leave her side for Bertalda's. Finally, the day comes that Bertalda, Undine, and her knight are all travelling by the waterside. Bertalda's necklace, given to her by the knight, is stolen by a mischievous water spirit. She and the knight are incensed and blame Undine, who dips her hand into the water and pulls out a different necklace, one much fairer than before. But her husband sees this necklace as yet more proof of her strangeness, and finally shouts, "You are a witch, go and trouble us no more." Undine bursts into tears as she disappears beneath the surface of the river, never again to return to land. It does not take long for the knight to forget Undine and instead marry Bertalda, and on that night, a ghostly figure emerges from their castle well and comes upon the knight. He looks upon the figure, who looks remarkably similar to Undine. "I have come for you, and you must die," she says to him. And so he does, for he had broken his promise to her, and he had to pay the price. A beautiful young woman suddenly comes to the attention of a creepy old murderer. A love story for the ages, right? Bluebeard is the tale of an ugly old man with, well, a blue beard. In fact, he is so ugly that none of the girls in the village want to marry him. A husband with a blue beard? Perish the thought. Plus, there's the troubling fact that Bluebeard has married before, but all of his previous wives have gone mysteriously missing. Determined to get his bride, Bluebeard throws her family and friends a lavish party. See, despite being ugly, Bluebeard is incredibly rich. That wealth was all Our Lady needed to rethink the matter. After all, his beard wasn't that blue. In a short time, they were married. Then, one day, Bluebeard must go out of town on a business trip. He gives his wife the keys to all the doors in the house, but orders her never to go to the cellar, promising the most terrible of punishments would await her if she did. Then he left. Of course, she couldn't resist the siren song of what lay beyond the cellar door. So, leaving her self-preservation behind, she crept down the cellar and opened the door to a pitch-black room. At first, she couldn't see anything, but then, slowly, her eyes adjusted. There, in the cellar full of congealed blood, lay the rotting and massacred bodies of Bluebeard's previous wives. She was so shocked she dropped the key, which became covered in blood. But the key was enchanted and she couldn't rub the blood off. When Bluebeard finally came home and discovers her treachery, he lifts her by the hair and draws his sword, ready to slit her throat, just like every woman who came before her, before getting run clean through by the lady's, previously unmentioned, brothers.
See, like I said in the other one, don't marry that old man with the money. He's got bodies in the cellar. I think that's what that whole thing was about. And I said that in the other thing, but come on now. You know what I mean? A tail like that, he's got blue beard, which means it could be gray, but look blue. You know what I mean? I doubt it's like bright blue. And, he's old, had several wives. Lots of money, because you see, they said the money made her want to marry him. She thought she had a sugar papi. Instead, my man is a sword-slinging crazy old dude with blue beard.
In this lesser-known Brothers Grimm tale, The Three Army Surgeons love to boast about how they're the best surgeons in the world everywhere they go. One night, an innkeeper dares them to prove it. They bet him that they can cut off parts of their own body and reattach them the next morning, and the innkeeper agrees. The first surgeon cuts off his hands, the second surgeon scrapes out his eyes, and the third surgeon tears out his own heart. Having done this, all three rub a secret magic salve on their bodies that will enable their organs to be reattached with no trouble the next morning. The heart, eyes, and hands are given to the servant girl for safekeeping.
What?
Unfortunately, the servant girl has a lover. While she was meant to keep watch over the organs, her lover visited and distracted her. In this time, the local inn cat stole away the organs and devoured them. Horrified, the servant girl tries to find a way to fix the mistake she made. She takes the heart of a pig she butchered earlier in the day, cuts the hands off a thief's corpse, and tears out the cat's eyes and passes them off as the surgeon's originals. The next morning, the three surgeons reattach their various organs. The innkeeper is incredibly impressed, and the three surgeons go on their way. But the surgeon with the pig's heart couldn't follow his friends, for every time they looked the other way, he was off rooting in the dirt as a pig would. The surgeon with the cat's eyes quickly found that he could not truly see, and had to be led around by his friends. The last surgeon stopped at the bar for a rest, and found his hands acting of their own accord and stealing things out of people's pockets. Enraged, they go back to the inn, only to discover their organs are long and forever gone. In return for this horror, they threaten to burn the damned place down. But no matter what, they can't do anything to return to the way they were originally, and are forced to be at the mercy of their new organs for the rest of their lives.
Wow. That's crazy, dude. Can you imagine?
A beautiful, pure-hearted boy named Diamond is whisked away by a spirit called the North Wind. Flying high over the housetops, crossing mountains and oceans, experiencing the world. At the back of the North Wind is a Victorian fairy tale that seems full of whimsy and delight, right up until the North Wind starts killing people. You see, although the North Wind presents itself as a beautiful goddess, the North Wind is actually the incarnation of death, and each night that the North Wind whisks Diamond away on those wonderful adventures, He's growing closer to his own death, losing weight, becoming feverish, and falling into comas, blissfully unaware of what is causing this. By the end of the story, Diamond and the North Wind greet each other as friends, and he says goodbye for the last time to his family. On the back of the North Wind, and experiencing all kinds of magical adventures, his life slips away from him, and worst of all, he couldn't be happier about it.
Sounds like some story of a kid running away to me.
Once upon a time, a princess is betrothed to a prince from far away. In the tale of the Goose Girl, the princess and her chambermaid set off to make the journey to a prince's castle. The mother gives her a talking horse and a protective spell, 3 droplets of blood on a handkerchief, before she leaves. During the journey, the chambermaid refuses to serve the princess, a circumstance that causes the drops of her mother's blood to cry out in sorrow with the princess. But one day, she accidentally drops the napkin, and with her only protection gone, the princess is made vulnerable. The chambermaid threatens to kill her and forces the princess to exchange clothes with her. Upon reaching the palace, the chambermaid is mistaken for the princess, and the princess is given a job as a goose girl. With her newfound power, the chambermaid has the talking horse's head chopped off, for fear the horse will give her away. In sorrow, the princess asks the person who does the deed to keep the head and mount it in a gateway nearby, so she might speak to it. So, her beloved horse's decapitated head weeps to her every day she passes by. The goose boy, whom she works with, eventually gets weirded out by this and tells the king he no longer wishes to work with her. Hearing the tale, the king goes to listen to the horse's head himself, and then chases the girl down and demands an explanation. She is too honourable to tell him, so he directs her to an iron stove and asks her to pour her heart out onto it, which she does, crying to a stove. Upon hearing the tale, the king returns her to his son as a princess. But that's not where this story ends.
No?
He further tricks the chambermaid by asking her if a servant had tricked his masters by doing something similar, what should the punishment be? The chambermaid cheerfully replies, she should be stripped stark naked and put in a barrel studded with sharp nails and dragged through the streets by 2 horses until she is dead. And so she was. In Chu Renho's novelization of Mulan's story, Mulan returns home from the war after nearly losing her life, only to discover that the father she left to protect is dead, and her mother has already remarried. On top of this, the Khan has requested to have Mulan brought to him, but not to honour her like in the Disney version. No, he wants her for his concubine. With her future stolen from her by a foreign ruler, and everything she fought to protect somehow destroyed, Mulan commits suicide. Her final words are, I am a girl. I have been through war and done enough. I now want to be with my father. In the original version of Pinocchio, our adorable puppet kills the talking cricket by hurling a hammer at it, blames the cricket for being murdered, burns his own feet off on a stovetop while being lazy, leads townspeople to assume that Geppetto has abused him and lands Geppetto in jail, and finally, almost mercifully, is hanged. In fact, this is where the original story of Pinocchio was meant to end. However, the editor who initially published it asked the author for a better ending, leading to the invention of the Blue Fairy. Personally, I like the original ending the best. I hope you enjoyed this week's list, and if you did, leave a like, and if you want to see...
Wow. So most of them I know. Some of them were kind of new to me that I can't remember, but Hey, yeah, all the Disney people. Mulan, Mulan. Original version of it. Man, they had some dark stuff back in the day. Of course, they didn't have TV and stuff, so I bet writers were a lot more imaginative back then, to draw people into the story and thing like that. Wow, that's some crazy stuff. But anyway, thank you all for watching this with me, man. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I am because it's making me relax and thing, after a hard day's work. You know what I mean? I'll leave the link to the description in the description. I can never get that right. I'll leave the link to this video in the description. Go check it out. Check out the channel. As you heard the man say, he got a bunch of other stuff on the scene and thing that you could go check. You know what I mean? But keep watching my stuff though. Right there. Click it. Click it. See what I go on with a brethren. Alright? And remember, cool